Hello, Ice Cubes. Welcome back to me reading Abandon My Eulogy by aroace-get-out-of-my-face on Tumblr. Um, thank you for all the kind comments about my reading on chapter 1. That's actually that's made my day. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. As a reminder, this fictional piece of work is rated mature and has main character death in it. Chapter 2's title is A Decision is Made. It's not exactly a great decision, but hey, progress. Without further ado, let's get into it. Stanford can't measure just how long he's been sitting here, kneeling in the snow. It feels like no time at all has passed, like the entire world has gone still and silent, along with the body in his arms. Ford blinks and realizes he'd been staring off into nothing, into something, into Stanley's pale and bloodless face. They've been here a long time. Snow has come down and covered them both in a layer of freezing powder. Ford's hands have gone numb, fingers frozen where they are clenched in Stan's thin coat. Ford leans back and disturbs frost from the top of Stanley's head with a hand. He continues the motion, petting with frozen fingers the snow from Stanley's ears, his nose. There are streaks of white in his eyebrows, and as Ford clears them back to their dark color, his fingers shake over Stan's eyes. Cloudy and gray. They've been outside long enough. Like a statue coming to life, Ford begins to rise. He unfolds one knee awkwardly, struggling under the weight of two, unwilling to let go of Stanley's body just yet. It is like moving a wooden board, a solid, the body locked completely in place. Ford wavers for a moment. He doesn't remember the last time he slept. His entire head throbs, his vision shakes, and he is not strong enough to carry them both. He is not strong enough. Stanford's feet make deep grooves in the snow as he drags the corpse up with him, arms around its torso. He's still crying fat, ugly drops that slide down his face, and every other breath is wet and wheezing. Sweet Moses, he'd killed his brother. This is shock, the quiet part of Ford's brain reasons, as he solidifies his footing and begins to pull Stan up the stairs of the front porch. Shock and grief, because you called your brother here, and then you killed him. Stanford locks his arms around Stanley's back and muffles a hitching sob into his dirty jacket. It smells like the cold, like blood, and that stuffy smell clothes get when you leave them in the washer for too long. It's comforting, and it's terrible. Ford heaves upwards again and pulls the rest of Stanley onto the porch. He stands there and pants for a moment. As he takes a small step backwards, his foot strikes something lying on the porch. Ford looks down at the fired crossbow. The world collapses inwards with a loud roar in Stanford's ears, and his thoughts, held back by a dam of fog, rush forward. An oily, disgusting voice creeps its way in. Its cadence is familiar, and Stanford hates its presence. "Why bother?" it said, and Stanford gasps. "He's dead, isn't he? What are you going to do?" The front door was wide open, left that way in a frenzy, in shock, in horror, in a mad scramble down the steps to this. Snow had blown in and melted just beyond the doorway, the entrance slick. Bring him inside. Stanford thinks back at the voice viciously. He drags Stan closer in, out of the wind, and over the doorway. Bring him inside and do something. The body only gets heavier as Stanford moves, but he refuses to let himself rest again. He stumbles faster, a horrible, burdensome thumping walk as he moves, shoving aside stacks of books, papers, and cluttered notes of scribbles. The entire living room is a mess of unkept specimens, the darkened room freezing cold. Stanford isn't even sure where he is going. His mind is a mantra of inside, inside, get him inside, warm, get him warm, and dead. Dead, he's dead. What's getting him inside gonna do? There's an armchair in the parlor. It is piled over with old boxes of paper and junk, and Ford dumps it all out onto the floor. The sound of falling trash doesn't even register. The voices in his head are unyielding. He gently lowers Stan into it, cupping the back of his head with a hand to stop it from flopping backwards. The eyes are still open, and with 2 shaking fingers, Ford slowly closes them. There is a bead of blood that had dribbled over Stanley's lip and onto his chin. Now it has dried, one line of brown red on his slack and bloodless face. Ford hiccups. A gust of wind shoots through the house with a whirl, dragging papers up into a frenzy. It brings in more dots of snow, of the smell of biting cold. Ford shivers and adjusts the collar of Stan's coat so it covers more of his neck. "Wait right here," he says, taking a step backward. He holds his hand out placatingly, as if Stan was going to jump out of the chair at any moment. I'll I'll be back in a minute, Lee. I have to go close the door." His voice sounds wretched. Ford backs up slowly, arms still reaching out, half terrified to let go at all. But his fear of what may lay just beyond the door is too much. Ford darts back to the front door. He pushes against it, blood-stained fingers scrabbling against the wood before clicking it into place and shutting out the forceful wind howling outside. He goes down the line of locks, frantically turning each one back into place. Deadbolt here, extra chain there, complete the protective sigil again, latch with a lock and key. He doesn't dare hesitate until he is done. The sooner he is, the better. The sooner he has Stanley back in view, the sooner he can breathe. "You left your brother behind for 10 years, that voice whispers again, slick and smug. "Now you can't let him rot there for 30 seconds? The last lock turns over and Stanford's feet slide on discarded papers in his haste to get back to Stan. The body remains where he'd left it, like a puppet with cut strings, limbs jutting out unnaturally. Stan's head is hanging low, his chin touching his chest, the arrow in his throat half mashed against his face. Stanford swallows painfully and lowers himself to the ground next to the armchair. He slumps against it, and slowly, so slowly, reaches up and clutches at the fabric of his brother's pant leg, the closest in reach. Stanford holds on to it quietly, like a child clinging for comfort. Comfort Stanford doesn't deserve. He'd murdered his brother. Ford feels his face screw up involuntarily. He drags his knees to his chest and takes in a large, gulping breath. It's here Stanford falls apart. Ford lets himself sob openly, sitting on the floor of his darkened house. For the first time since he was a teenager, Stanford lets himself cry. He buries his face in his knees and shakes with his grief, gripping his hair with the hand not latched to his brother's leg. Ford can't get in a proper breath, the air catching in his throat. He gasps in, and for just a beat, he goes silent. Then he lets out a long, low wail. The sound carries, echoing through the house. It travels over scattered papers, overturned chairs and broken teacups. It bounces off wooden walls, reverberating through the rooms and around corners. It leaches into closets, into drawers and boxes, and back around to Ford, settling over his shoulders like a shroud. He hasn't cried like this since he was a teenager. That summer night back in New Jersey, he'd sat down with his back to drawn curtains and sobbed into his fists until the morning. He'd cried for his project, for his dreams, for himself, the betrayal he'd suffered. A science project. Was that really all it was? All those years lost, and what was Ford's excuse? An accident. Was that all it had been? This had been an accident. Now, sitting at the foot of his brother's corpse, Stanford understands the desperation in those words. Ford pulls his head up and stares forward, breathing shakily. Accidents could be fixed. They weren't always so final. "This is death," that voice in his mind whispers gleefully. "What's more final than that?" "And what's my mind good for?" Stanford thinks back, his thoughts whirling. "If not for doing the impossible." He turns his head, craning his neck upwards to look at his brother's body, sagging in the chair. Blood has stopped flowing from the wound, but it stains Stanley's entire front in a grotesque wave. Ford says suddenly. He swallows, his voice sounding wrecked, but he is determined. He rises up to his knees and pulls a little on Stan's jacket. "I'm going to fix this, Stanley. I will." Ford stands up slowly, unhindered by his cracking knees. He keeps one hand on Stanley's shoulder and grips it too tight. "It'll be all right. You'll see. Ford pauses and looks around at his house. Bookshelves full of research on the paranormal, on things that other scientific fields deemed impossible, insane. Shelves full of accounts, reports, and encyclopedias. Stanford had dedicated pages in his journals to spells, incantations, and magic, that surely some of them could fix this problem. Death. Stanford would fix it. Fix this. For Stanley. I can do it, he whispers. Stanley does not reply.